The crystal chandelier cast fractured light across the marble floor where Detective Olivia Hart knelt beside a shattered picture frame. Blood, not much, just a thin smear across the glass, and a few drops that had dried into dark commas on the stone. She's been gone for 22 hours, Detective Marcus Cole said, his voice echoing in the cavernous penthouse study. But this wasn't a robbery. Hart lifted a torn photograph from the shards with her gloved fingers, a beautiful woman with dark hair and emerald eyes. Victoria Ashford, smiling beside a distinguished man in an expensive charcoal suit. Someone had scratched deep, violent gouges across Victoria's face, carving hatred into the paper like a confession. Hart's eyes narrowed. This isn't panic. This is personal. Cole crouched beside her, scanning the room like it was a chessboard. Scratches are fresh, paint flakes under someone's fingernails, and the blood spatter pattern suggests someone was struck here, then moved. Hart stood slowly, knees protesting. Whoever did this knew the penthouse. Cole's gaze drifted to the flawless shelves of art books, the concealed liquor cabinet, the pristine desk, and the one thing that didn't fit, a single wine glass on the corner table, lipstick on the rim. Still, like a moment, had been frozen mid-breath. Hart looked at Cole. We're not standing in the aftermath of a crime. Cole swallowed. We're standing in the middle of a story someone is still trying to control. And to understand how they got here, they had to go back 6 days. 6 days earlier, Victoria Ashford looked like she had everything. At 34, she was married to Richard Ashford III, heir to a shipping fortune, and owner of the city's most prestigious chain of art galleries. Their penthouse overlooked the harbor, where million-dollar yachts bobbed like toys. Charity galas, private dinners, weekend getaways that appeared in glossy magazines. From the outside, it was perfect. But perfection has a sound. It's quiet. Too quiet. And it cracks the first time someone slips a letter under the door. The first letter arrived on cream-colored paper, with a subtle watermark. The handwriting was careful, controlled, almost elegant. Victoria read it once, then again, then folded it so tightly the paper creased like bone. Richard said she laughed it off. Victoria didn't. 2 days later, the second letter arrived, then the third, then the fourth. By the time the fifth letter appeared, the staff had begun to whisper, and the elevator rides had started to feel too long. That was when Richard Ashford called the police. He didn't call 911 like a man in panic. He called like a man summoning a service. Hart and Cole met him in the penthouse, the morning after Victoria disappeared. Richard opened the door himself. He was immaculate, in the way only certain men could be, even when broken. Shirt wrinkled but expensive, tie loosened but still symmetrical, hair uncombed but still styled by habit. "Detectives," he said, voice low. "Thank you for coming so quickly." He led them through a museum disguised as a home. Modern sculptures, canvases worth more than small buildings, glass cases filled with curated beauty. "Victoria didn't come to bed," he said, "and she never misses our morning coffee." Cole's eyes stayed on Richard's hands. They were clean, no tremor, no bite of fear. Hart didn't like that. "She's been gone since?" Hart asked. "Last night, Tuesday. She came home around 7. Richard's gaze flicked toward the windows, then away. She was distracted. "Tell us about the letters," Cole said. Richard guided them to the mahogany dining table. where the letters were laid out as if for an exhibit. Hart read aloud snippets. Careful not to touch without gloves. You can't run from what we had. He doesn't know you like I do. I watch you every day. Soon you'll remember where you truly belong. Cole photographed each one. Methodical. Did your wife seem frightened? Hart asked. Richard's laugh came sharp and bitter. Victoria? Frightened? You don't know my wife. Hart watched his eyes. He didn't look like a man worried about losing the love of his life. He looked like a man insulted that reality had dared to disobey him. But the letters got personal, Richard continued. Details about what she wore, where she went, who she spoke to. That's when I hired private security. Security that failed, Cole said, almost gentle. Richard's jaw tightened.
Apparently.
Hart walked to the window overlooking the harbor. Mr. Ashford, was Victoria hiding anything from you? Anyone from her past? Richard went still. Then, carefully, there was someone, before we married, David Chen. Cole's gaze lifted. Ex-boyfriend? Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. Obsessive artist type. Victoria ended it. He didn't accept it. Restraining order? Hart asked. Yes. Richard's voice turned colder. He violated it twice. 30 days in jail the second time. Hart nodded slowly. Where is he now? Richard spread his hands. No idea. Victoria refused to speak of him. That chapter was closed. Hart and Cole exchanged a look. Closed chapters had a way of reopening, especially when someone kept writing new pages in the dark. They started with the building. Frank Morrison, head of security, former police, 23 years in uniform before private work, met them in the security office. Mrs. Ashford entered Tuesday at 6:47 p.m. Morrison said, pulling up footage. Keycard. Smiled at Jimmy at the desk like always. Normal? Hart asked. Completely. Morrison switched cameras. Victoria walked toward the elevator bank, and just before the doors opened, she turned. She stared straight through the lobby windows. Her face tightened. Fear, pure, instinctive, flashed across her expression like a warning flare. Cole leaned forward. She saw someone. Morrison nodded. But here's the thing. She never came back down, not on any camera. Service elevator? Hart asked. Needs a special card. Maintenance and residence. Morrison pulled another clip. 11:23 p.m. Someone uses the service elevator to access the parking garage. A figure in a dark coat and baseball cap moved carefully, face angled away from the lens. Male or female? Cole asked. Hard to tell. Hart stared at the timestamp. 5 hours after she went up. Cole exhaled slowly. So what was happening for 5 hours? Morrison didn't answer. The video didn't either. They went to David Chen next. He lived in a converted warehouse in the Arts District. A place that smelled like paint, turpentine, and obsession. Hart felt it before she saw it. Victoria was everywhere. Portraits, sketches, oil paintings. Victoria laughing. Victoria reading. Victoria sleeping. Some looked like they were painted from photos. Others looked like they were painted from proximity. Cole's jaw tightened. This isn't art. This is surveillance with brushstrokes. Hart murmured. David Chen looked up from his easel like he'd been expecting them. Thin, tired, paint-stained. Dark circles that made his eyes look haunted. I wondered when you'd come, he said. When did you last see Victoria? Cole asked. Tuesday. Outside her building. Around 6:30. You were watching her, Hart said. Calm. I watch her every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. His voice was matter-of-fact, like he was describing weather. She has a routine. You have a restraining order, Hart reminded him. 500 feet. David smiled without humor. Restraining orders are paper. Cole's tone sharpened. Did you approach her? No. But she saw me. David's eyes narrowed. She looked frightened. Of you? David shook his head slowly. No. She was already scared. Someone had been following her. Hart froze. Tell me. Black BMW. 3 cars back. Professional. Not like me. His smile turned bitter. Not an artist with a broken heart. Cole took a step closer. Where were you? After 6:30. David pointed to his laptop. Instagram Live. Painting session. 7 to midnight. 43 viewers. Check the timestamps. Hart held his gaze. If he was lying, he was confident. If he wasn't, then someone else had been close enough to put fear in Victoria's eyes before she even stepped into the lobby. Hart's phone buzzed. Forensics. The blood found at the penthouse scene isn't Victoria's, the text said. Male DNA. No match in the system. Also, fibers in the glass fragments. Italian wool. Hand-tailored. High-end suit. Hart looked at Cole. David Chen wore a paint-stained t-shirt. Richard Ashford wore $1,000 suits like armor. Then Hart's phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. Stop looking for her. Some things are better left lost. Hart stared at the screen. Cole's voice was low. That's not David. No. Hart's eyes hardened. That's someone who thinks they own the ending. They went to the Ashford Gallery next. Sleek glass and steel. Richard's name in gold letters. Art that looked like money. Learned how to breathe. The receptionist stood as soon as she saw the badges. Mr. Ashford isn't in today. He called. Said he needed time. We need access to his office, Hart said. I'll need to call our lawyers. This is a missing person investigation. Cole cut in. Every hour matters. Reluctantly, the receptionist allowed them through. Richard's public office was immaculate. Too immaculate. Mahogany desk. Leather chairs. Photos of Richard with politicians. Celebrities and art world royalty. Cole ran a hand along the bookshelf. Then he stopped. This shelf, he murmured. It's loose. He pressed. The bookshelf shifted. A hidden door opened like the building exhaled. Hart stepped into Richard's real office and felt her stomach drop. Not art. Surveillance. Hundreds of photographs of Victoria in public places, captured through windows, behind bushes, from angles too intimate to be accidental. Journals. Leather-bound notebooks, filled with Richard's handwriting. Hart opened one at random. March 15. Victoria spoke to the mailman for 4 minutes. Too long. She smiled twice. She never smiles like that at me anymore. March 22. Lunch with Sarah Chen. Victoria laughed 14 times. Intimacy. April 3. Phone call 2:17 p.m. Took it on the balcony. Secrecy. Cole flipped pages. Face going pale. At least 3 years, he whispered. Maybe longer. Hart found the newest entry. Tuesday. She knows. I saw it when I mentioned David. She knows I'm watching. If she tries to leave, I'll stop her. Permanently. Hart's throat tightened. Cole's voice went colder. He didn't report her missing because someone took her. Hart nodded slowly. He reported her missing because he wanted the police looking anywhere but at him. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. Pier 47. Sunset. Come alone or she dies. Cole's eyes snapped to Hart. We need backup. Hart was already dialing. Silent backup. 2 blocks out. Harbor patrol in the water. Lights off. Body cams on. Cole watched her. You think she's alive? Hart's jaw clenched. I think she's smart enough to leave breadcrumbs. And I think Richard Ashford is arrogant enough to think breadcrumbs only lead where he points. Pier 47 sat on the abandoned side of the waterfront. Weathered wood, dark water, warehouses looming like silent witnesses. Richard's black BMW waited at the end of the pier. Through the back window, they saw Victoria, slumped, conscious, groggy, drugged. Richard stood beside the car, chrome pistol in his right hand. That's far enough, he called, voice carrying over the water. Hart's tone was calm, measured. Richard, we found your office. Richard laughed, a hollow sound. Then you understand. This is love. This is control, Cole said. What's the difference? Richard snapped. I know her, every breath, every expression. I memorized her so no one else could steal her. Victoria stirred. Her voice came out weak but clear. Richard, you didn't memorize me. You monitored me. Richard's face twitched. I protected you. You isolated me, Victoria whispered. Hart took a careful step closer. Richard, put the gun down. He didn't. Victoria's hand moved under her coat. Hart caught it. Small, deliberate, a tiny recording device. Hart's heart kicked. Victoria, Hart said softly. How long have you been awake? Victoria managed a faint smile. Long enough. Richard's eyes widened. What did you do? Victoria's voice steadied, strength returning like a tide. I found your hidden office 3 weeks ago. The cameras, the journals. Cole's eyes narrowed. The letters. Victoria swallowed. I didn't write them. Richard stiffened. Hart's gaze locked on him. Then who did? Victoria's eyes stayed on Richard. He did. Richard's laugh was sharp, frantic. That's a lie. Victoria shook her head slowly. You wanted to scare me into staying. You wanted to make me believe the world outside you was dangerous. Richard's grip on the gun tightened. I was protecting us. No, Victoria said, and for the first time her voice held no fear at all. You were building a cage and calling it love. Hart's mind raced. Blood in the penthouse. Scratched photograph. The blind spot near the bedroom door. Richard, Hart said carefully. The blood in the penthouse wasn't Victoria's. Richard blinked. Cole's voice was low. You cut yourself destroying evidence. Victoria nodded. Tears shining. He grabbed our framed photo and started scraping my face out like if he erased me, he could rewrite me. Richard's breathing turned uneven. The gun trembled. Hart saw it, the moment when his control began to fracture. Not because he loved Victoria, because he was losing ownership. Richard, Hart said, steady. You're surrounded. Put it down. He glanced toward the shadows. Backup units were invisible, but presence has a weight. He felt it. Victoria lifted the recording device higher. Everything you just said is recorded. Richard's face went pale. His eyes darted. Harbor, water, warehouse windows. the car, then back to Victoria. You forced me, he whispered. Victoria's voice was quiet. No, I did everything for you. No, she repeated, firmer. You did everything for you. Richard's hand jerked. Heart moved. 23 years of training. She lunged forward as Cole flanked right. Drop it, Cole shouted. Richard's arm swung wildly. The gun discharged into the wooden planks of the pier. A deafening crack. Hart slammed into Richard, driving him down. Cole kicked the weapon away and secured it. Richard sobbed, collapsing in on himself like a building whose supports had been pulled. Victoria made a sound. Half breath, half prayer. Backup surged in. Cuffs clicked. The BMW door opened. Paramedics rushed Victoria, checking her vitals, testing for sedatives. Hart stood over Richard Ashford III, watching him shake, not in remorse, in disbelief that the world had dared say no. Later, with emergency lights painting the pier in red and blue, Hart sat beside Victoria on a bench overlooking the harbor. Are you okay? Hart asked gently. Victoria stared at the water like she'd never seen it before. For the first time in years, I can breathe. Cole stood nearby, speaking quietly to an officer. Hart kept her voice soft. Why didn't you leave earlier? Victoria's smile was sad. Because leaving isn't one act. It's 1,000. She swallowed. At first, he was charming, romantic, attentive. Hart nodded, listening. Then attention became questions. Questions became rules. Rules became surveillance. Victoria's hands clenched. By the time I realized I was living inside a system, I was already isolated. Friends stopped calling. My phone mysteriously lost contacts. Invitations never reached me. Every choice became. Hart felt anger rise in her chest. Controlled, cold, Cole returned, his face hard. He had cameras in the penthouse. Hidden. Victoria closed her eyes. I know. Hart glanced at the recording device, still in Victoria's hand. This saved you. Victoria nodded. I started recording 3 weeks ago when I found the hidden office. Not because I wanted revenge. Her voice broke. Because I needed proof that I wasn't crazy. Hart leaned closer. You did everything right. Victoria looked at her, eyes glossy. Now, I just did the only thing I could. A breeze came off the water. The harbor lights blinked like distant, indifferent stars. Cole's voice softened as he joined them. David Chen checked out. His live stream confirms it. He's not your culprit. Victoria exhaled, a quiet release. Good. Hart watched her carefully. Do you feel safe? Victoria's gaze moved over the pier, the police, the paramedics, the open night. I will, she said. Not tonight, not tomorrow. Then she looked at Hart, and something steadied in her expression. But I will. At the station, as paperwork piled like gravity, Hart stood outside the interrogation room, watching Richard through the glass. He sat with his head in his hands. Not broken, contained. Cole joined her. You know what's worse than the hidden office? Hart didn't look away. Tell me. Cole held up a sealed evidence bag. Inside was a small key. And a tiny metal plate, stamped with a brand name. Service Elevator Keycard Modifier, Cole said. He had access to every blind spot in that building. Hart's jaw tightened. He didn't just panic, Hart murmured. Cole nodded. He planned. Hart's eyes stayed on Richard. Then she said quietly, And she survived anyway. 2 days later, Hart returned to the penthouse one last time, not for evidence, not for closure. Victoria stood near the shattered frame's former place, a suitcase by her side. "I'm leaving," Victoria said. Hart nodded.
Where?
"Somewhere he can't curate." A small smile. "Somewhere my life doesn't look like a gallery exhibit." Cole leaned against the door frame. "You'll testify?" Victoria's gaze turned steel. "Absolutely." Hart hesitated. "Victoria, that scratched portrait. The rage in it." Victoria's voice was calm. "That wasn't hate for me." Hart frowned slightly. Victoria met her eyes. "It was hate for the version of me he couldn't control." Then she lifted her suitcase. "Thank you," she said. Hart answered simply, "You did the hardest part." As Victoria walked out, the chandelier light fractured across the marble. But this time it didn't feel like a crime scene. It felt like daylight breaking through glass. Some cases end with handcuffs. Some end with headlines. But the ones that stay with detectives the longest, they end with a door opening, a woman walking into her own life, and the quiet realization that the most dangerous cages are the ones built out of love-shaped lies. All characters and institutions in this story are entirely fictional, and any resemblance to real ones is purely coincidental.